When the train arrived late at the station, the wind came from the sea, and the old hotel sign gave a faint creak as it swung. Nights in this town made no sound, yet that evening, behind the windows, small, insignificant things occurred. A grain of sand pressed into the doorframe, a single fleck of sea salt fallen upon a cushion, the lobby clock striking 1/2 when it was still 2 minutes before. Nobody cared. Nobody noticed either when, after midnight, a woman slipped silently out of her room. She wore a light coat. The carpet in the hotel's narrow corridor muffled her steps. On the landing she paused, listening. A muffled sound below, then silence. Her hand touched the banister. Her fingers were bare of gloves. Midway down she halted, turning her head as though someone watched her. No one was there. That was the last time she was seen. The next morning the young man at reception knocked to deliver her coffee. No reply. Inside, the bed was neatly made, her small suitcase unopened, her brush still inside its cloth case. 2 details, however, were peculiar. The window had been left open, and a thread was torn from the curtain, caught upon the sash, trembling in the sea breeze. The room smelled of salt air. The teaspoon was missing from the coffee tray. The proprietress, a woman well acquainted with the town's ways, remarked, "Our guest has gone for a morning walk." The seafront awoke early. Fishermen drew in nets. Gulls complained. No one paid heed. Yet she did not return by noon. In the afternoon the clerk from the courthouse came, and by evening the station watchman. In a small place a disappearance is quickly heard, quickly spoken of. Witnesses appeared, as they always do. An elderly couple claimed to have seen a shadow at the pier just after midnight. The receptionist swore he had overheard a whispering voice on the lobby telephone, though he could not say whose. A schoolteacher, lodged opposite, reported a strange gleam from the window before dawn. Another added that the flicker reflected upon the glass of a storm lamp precisely where the hired bicycles stood. All accounts seemed to corroborate one another, or else no one was telling the truth. Her name was entered clearly in the register. Nothing in her identity was amiss, yet a single paper was missing from her bag, the hotel map. The telephone cord in the lobby showed signs of having been twisted, then hastily straightened. Down by the harbor lay half a footprint in the sand, the rest erased by a wave. And the town, rather than discuss what these small details might mean, went on sipping its afternoon tea. That night, another window opened on the upper floor. This time, someone looked out, holding the spoon that had vanished the previous evening. Upon the curve of its handle lay a faint scratch, invisible to the naked eye. Something scraped away. As the window closed, the lobby clock struck again, this time 2 minutes late. Now, 3 questions must be asked. Did the woman truly leave her room alone? Why did so many remember so much the next morning, having seen nothing the night before? And most of all, why did the clock, once eager, then grow reluctant? Before we begin to unravel these mysteries, don't forget to like this story and subscribe to our channel for more strange and secret happenings. If you are ready, let us begin. The town was called Levanton. Wedged between the sea and the cliffs, it carried the faint, lingering smell of salt in its streets, and its people knew one another a little too well. The only thing that had not changed for years was the 3-story hotel at the end of the coastal road. The townsfolk still called it Granada Pension, though the faded sign declared in pale letters, Hotel Miramar. The stone walls of the 1930s building bore moss stains. Its balconies were adorned with iron flowers. Inside, a clock sat on the reception desk, the lobby held worn sofas, and the walls were hung with oil-painted landscapes. Guests who chose this place usually sought to escape the crowd. Businessmen, weekend visitors, city runaways, and sometimes those who carried a past best left unspoken, found their way here. The missing woman's name was Elena Marlowe. When she wrote it into the register, her hand never trembled. She carried a small black suitcase. Only a few dresses, a box, and a closed notebook lay within. The receptionist noticed the notebook, but said nothing. In a town like this, one did not pry into a stranger's secrets. Yet Elena's eyes seemed always to glance behind her, as if someone might be following. The receptionist, Thomas, was in his 20s, with wavy hair and a shy manner. That evening, as he showed Elena to her room, he noticed something curious on the stairs. The heels of her shoes were scarcely worn, almost new, yet the handle of her suitcase was frayed as though it had been carried for years. A small, unimportant detail perhaps, but Thomas stored it away in his mind. The proprietress, Mrs. Hargreaves, a widow, was known in the town for her discipline. The hotel was her pride, and nothing escaped her notice. Cleanliness, menus, timetables, she controlled it all. When she saw Elena, a faint suspicion crossed her face, but she handed over the key with courtesy. "Third floor, room 12. Your window looks onto the sea," she said. As Elena ascended, several guests lingered in the lobby. Mr. Collier, a businessman in his 50s, claiming to be from the city, reading his newspaper yet always pricking up his ears at others' conversations. Miss Dorothy Finch, a solitary schoolteacher. With notebook in hand, she was constantly observing, writing down what she saw. Dr. Leonard Hale, a middle-aged physician. He appeared quiet, but his eyes studied hands and faces with professional scrutiny. Mr. and Mrs. Wilcox, an elderly couple who disliked noise and whispered together in the corner armchairs. That night, dinner was served in the small dining room. The candles flickered, the pendulum of the wall clock swung with steady rhythm. Elena sat alone by the window. She pushed away her soup half-finished, lost in thought. At that moment, Mr. Collier, stirring his coffee, allowed his gaze to linger upon her a little too long. Dr. Hale noticed, but said nothing. Then a small incident occurred. A slender envelope slipped from Elena's bag onto the table. Thomas bent quickly and returned it. "Thank you," Elena murmured. Yet in that instant, a trace of unease passed across her eyes, visible to all. The envelope bore no address, only 3 letters, A.M.R. By 11 o'clock the corridors of the hotel had grown still. The Wilcoxes retired, Miss Finch wrote her final notes, and Mr. Collier folded his newspaper. Only Dr. Hale remained a little longer, smoking his pipe in the lobby. As Elena went upstairs, their eyes met briefly. At that moment, one thought came unbidden to the doctor's mind. This woman had come here to escape, not merely to hide. But when midnight struck, the town wind rose sharply, the waves thundered, a window creaked, and footsteps echoed in the corridor. Yet not a soul awoke. As midnight drew near, the yellow lights in the lobby burned low. Thomas opened the small drawer beneath the desk and counted the day's receipts. Mrs. Marlowe had paid in cash, small notes, arranged with deliberate care. What struck him as odd was the thin sheet that slipped from one of the envelopes, a faded copy of the hotel's floor plan. Ordinarily, such plans were kept in the third compartment of the rack beside the desk. One was missing, he realized at once, though he said nothing. From the rear door appeared the night porter, Elliot. His hair was cropped short, his expression habitually grave, as though he were perpetually expecting rain. "I'll extinguish the lamps by the shore," he said. "The wind is shifting." On his key ring hung the master key, the only one that opened every room. Elliot never lent it save when Mrs. Hargreaves herself asked for it, and then he hung it on the hook beneath the desk. That night the hook was empty. The key remained with him. From the kitchen came Mabel, the chambermaid. Broad-shouldered but soft-spoken, she carried a tray of cleaned coffee cups. As she set it down, she muttered, "1 spoon short." Thomas looked up. "I laid out 12. "There are 11, Mabel replied, pursing her lips. "Perhaps one was left on a table." She paused, then added, almost too boldly for such a house, "Or perhaps someone pocketed it." Thomas gave a half-smile. "We'll look in the morning." It was 5 to 11. The clock, wound each evening, struck habitually on the half-hour. Yet tonight its hands looked strangely hurried, as if set forward by an inattentive hand. When Thomas adjusted the glass, his finger found a fine crack at one corner, new, delicate, and sharp to the touch. The door opened suddenly. With the gust of sea air entered Sergeant Rowley of the Leventon Police. His uniform fluttered faintly with the smell of fish-laden wind. "Some lads on motorbikes along the coast. I'll keep an eye," he said. Mrs. Hargreaves asked, "Ought we dim the lamps?" "No," said Rowley. "Light deters idlers more than thieves." His glance swept the lobby. To him the hotel always conveyed a sense of order. Tonight was no exception. At the stairhead Miss Finch appeared. "May I telephone?" she asked softly. Thomas noticed the cord was kinked, twisted as though tugged and dropped. Miss Finch dialed carefully. The first attempt yielded no signal. "The line is weak," she murmured. On the second, she connected. She spoke only 2 sentences. "I shall not arrive by noon tomorrow. This place is not as deserted as you think." She replaced the receiver, scribbled something in her notebook, and withdrew to her room. Dr. Hale, pipe in hand, studied the abandoned menu on the table. "The fish soup was poor," he remarked deliberately, as if he wished someone to hear. Thomas shrugged. "The nets are empty this season, Doctor." Hale inclined his head slightly. Soup was not what he meant. He extinguished his pipe and walked into the corridor. There upon the stairs grains of sand had gathered, oddly not scattered across the tread, but pressed into the edge of a step, as though someone had paused, balancing on one foot. He noted the detail and pocketed it in his mind. Mr. Collier, meanwhile, slid a paper between the pages of his newspaper. Thomas caught sight of the dark letters at its corner. A.M.R. Collier, realizing, turned the page at once. Thomas remembered the very same letters upon the envelope Elena had dropped at dinner. But Collier's slip was no letter. It looked more like a copy of the hotel account. "I intend to take the morning train to the city," Collier announced, though no one had asked. "The weather is turning." His tone was neutral, and neutral tones often conceal the most. The Wilcoxes had long since retired. Elliot fastened the back door with a chain, but the final link was slack, bent as if by a blow, loose enough to slip free. He paused, noting it. For weeks he had meant to replace it, and once more muttered, "Tomorrow," as he turned down the lamps. On the 3rd floor, Mabel checked the rooms. At the threshold of number 12 she noticed a glint, a fragment of glass. She bent, picked it up with her nail. Had it come from the window, or from the back of a hand mirror? Without knowing why, she wrapped it in a napkin and slipped it into her pocket. Twice her trolley snagged on the carpet just outside the same door, as though the weave were worn thin. At the desk, Thomas examined the telephone log. Outgoing calls to the city were always marked with a dash and the hour. His eyes widened at the entry. 0022. Long-distance call. It could not have been Miss Finch. Her call had been placed at 2340. Then who? There was no name. Only a napkin, damp and faintly gritty with salt, lay beside the telephone, as though carried straight from the shore. When Mrs. Hargreaves returned to the lobby, the pen from the desk was missing. "Put it back," she told Thomas. He looked up, surprised. "I never touched it." "Then who did?" she asked. In this house, objects in their place were of no consequence, but once displaced, they became matters of importance. A sudden knock. The door opened, and in came a lady fastening the collar of her traveling cloak. Mrs. Amelia Rosemont, tired, as though she had missed her train. "Have you a room for the night?" she asked. Thomas opened the register. The initials of her surname struck him, A.R. For a moment he hesitated, then handed her the key. "2nd floor, room 7. She thanked him and went upstairs. Dr. Hale watched her, thoughtful. In a small town, strangers do not arrive by chance. After midnight, the clock struck again, this time several minutes late. "The spring is loose," Thomas murmured. Elliot tested the chain once more. Mabel forgot the shard of glass in her pocket. Dr. Hale remembered the sand upon the stair. And Miss Finch wrote a single sentence in her notebook. When we believe we have seen something, it is more often that we have heard it. At the same moment, in the darkness of the 2nd floor, a door opened very slowly, without so much as a click. Which door? That night, in that corridor, only 3 bolts had not been drawn from the inside. Shortly after midnight, the silence in the corridors became almost unbearable. At such hours even the faintest creak would echo. Yet strangely, everyone behaved as though they had heard nothing. Before the door of room 12, a narrow shadow appeared upon the carpet. It lingered for a moment, then slid away. Above, in the attic, the pigeons started and beat their wings. Within the hotel there was nothing but the tick of the clock and the far-off roar of the sea. Downstairs at the reception desk, Thomas dozed lightly. His eyes, half shut, suddenly fixed on the telephone. The receiver did not rest quite properly on its hook. Yet Miss Finch, when she had finished her call, had replaced it neatly. Thomas touched the cord. It was warm, as if it had been used only minutes before. But at that moment, the lobby was empty. Dr. Hale, on his way to his room, paused briefly on the third floor. From one of the windows he gazed towards the shore. Moonlight struck the sea. At that instant, a lantern light flickered from the narrow path behind the hotel. He could not see who bore it. Then it vanished abruptly. Seconds later came a muffled sound, a door closing deep in the disused boiler room. The doctor did not retrace his steps. He merely noted in his diary, "Lantern, 0030. The Wilcox couple would later swear they had slept soundly until morning. Yet beneath the wife's gentle snores, she admitted to seeing a woman's figure at the window. But she had confused her times, midnight with 3 o'clock. When Elliot tested the back door chain for the second time, he slipped the weak link into his pocket. The chain was unreliable, but he did not refasten it. Only in the morning would he remember, when it was too late. Mrs. Hargreaves, making her final round of the corridors, glanced at the door of room 12. The bolt appeared drawn, yet the bolt was old. At times it looked fastened when it was not. She dismissed the thought and descended slowly. Just then, from the small library came a faint click. A shelf stirred as though a book had been taken, but the room was empty. Only the following morning would the absence be noticed. The Chronicle of Lost Voyages, 1890 to 1910. At 1 o'clock the clock struck precisely on time. Yet even its chime could not drown the footsteps that passed between the rooms, a sound that would soon vanish without a trace. Who had walked there? No one had seen. By morning, Elena Marlowe's bed was neatly made. Her room, empty. Only 3 peculiar traces remained. A single thread caught upon the window frame. The missing teaspoon. A page torn from her notebook. By noon the town was already talking. Yet contradiction colored every tale. Some swore they had seen her at the shore. Others claimed her lamp still burned long after midnight. Everyone had seen, yet no one had seen the truth. Most curious of all was the note in the reception log. 0022, long-distance call. At the end of the receiver there had been nothing but the hum of the wind. Yet who had spoken, no one could tell. As the first light of dawn crept over Leventon, the sea lay across the horizon like a gray curtain. The windows of the hotel breathed in the salt wind. The curtains stirred faintly. The day began as it always did, fishermen gathering their nets at the quay, the baker firing his first loaves. Yet in one room on the 3rd floor of the Hotel Miramar, the silence was more profound than usual. Thomas, tray in hand, prepared the morning coffees. As he set the cups in place, he thought again of Mabel's remark from the night before, the missing spoon. He dismissed it and carried the tray upstairs. At precisely 7 o'clock he rapped upon the door of room 12. No reply. He tried again. Still silence. Gently he opened the door. Everything was in perfect order. The bed was neatly made, not hastily, but with the precision of the chambermaid's morning hand. The small black valise on the side table remained shut. On the dressing table the brush stood, the perfume bottle unopened. Yet the window stood wide. The sea wind ballooned the curtain inward, and from its hem a loose thread trembled against the sill. The sight sent a chill through Thomas. Stranger still, the spoon was missing still. He glanced about the room. It was nowhere. On the bedstead he noticed a faint scratch, as though something had rubbed against the wood. He could not say what it meant, but as he left, the thought remained. Something is wrong. Downstairs, Mrs. Hargreaves was already in the kitchen. Thomas told her. She frowned and went up at once. "No one could have entered from outside," she declared. "The window is too high and chained besides." Thomas held his tongue. He could not bring himself to mention Elliot and the weakened link. By 8, the other guests assembled for breakfast. Mr. Collier, newspaper in hand, took his place. He pointed out a bold headline. "Disappearance cases increase in the city." His eyes flicked to the others, measuring their reactions. Miss Finch opened her notebook and jotted brief remarks. Dr. Hale sipped his coffee, never once glancing from the table. The Wilcoxes whispered together, their ears alert. With a faint smile Mrs. Hargreaves addressed them. The lady in room 12 must have gone out for an early walk. She has not returned, but there is no cause for alarm." Yet beneath her usual composure was a tremor of unease. During breakfast, the contradictions began. The Wilcoxes claimed to have seen a woman's figure at the window after midnight. "But the hour, I cannot be certain," admitted Mr. Wilcox. His wife insisted it had been 3 o'clock. Their times did not agree. Miss Finch spoke next. "At dawn I saw a curious light, a lantern shining towards the shore." Thomas started. Dr. Hale had noted the same, though Finch described it differently. "It came from the path behind the hotel," she insisted. Mr. Collier merely shrugged. "I saw no one, but I did hear a telephone call from the lobby, a man's voice, whispering. It was about 1 o'clock. Thomas stiffened. He recalled the receiver half off the hook, but the record in the log read 0022. By 9, Sergeant Rowley arrived. Mrs. Hargreaves had felt obliged to summon the authorities. Quietly he questioned them all. At first glance it was simple. A woman had left of her own accord, yet the closed valise, the unopened perfume, and the torn page from her notebook suggested otherwise. Rowley examined the window. "No marks," he said, "but this thread, this is not from the curtain. It is from a shawl." Thomas remembered Elena's delicate scarf. Yes, it was the same. But had she gone through the window? Impossible. It was the 3rd floor, with only rock below. Then Mabel appeared, her trolley at her side. From her pocket she drew a folded napkin, inside it the shard of glass. "I found this at the threshold," she said. Rowley held it to the light. "Not window glass, decorative, from a mirror perhaps." Elena's hand mirror was intact. Then where had it come from? By 11, the town was already whispering. A fisherman claimed he had seen a woman in a black coat at the pier. Another swore she had been on the opposite shore at the same hour. Both certain, both impossible. The tension inside the hotel thickened. Eyes watched eyes. Every small gesture suggested guilt. Dr. Hale said quietly to Rowley, "This is no disappearance. It is a plan. Someone wished her gone, or wished it to appear so." Rowley frowned. "And your proof?" Hale showed his note. "Lantern, 0030. Near noon, a slip of paper was discovered in Thomas's desk. 3 letters only, hastily scrawled. AMR, the same as on Elena's fallen envelope, the same as on Collier's sheet. Rowley puzzled over them, but the pieces would not fit. That afternoon, Miss Finch made a disclosure. "After midnight I met someone in the lobby," she said. "He held a small metal object. I think it was a key." Rowley's eyes fell upon Elliot. The porter swore, "The master key was with me. I never parted with it." Yet the broken chain link remained unexplained. By evening the rumors had spread. Some said she had fled an old lover. Others whispered of a secret tryst beyond the town. The boldest insisted she had never left the hotel at all, that she was hiding still within its walls. For more than one guest swore they had glimpsed a shadow at dawn, framed in a window. That night the police kept watch. Still no sign of Elena Marlowe. When at last her valise was opened, not only dresses lay within, but a half-written letter. It began, "My dear, I must write these lines, for if anything should happen to me." It ended abruptly. The page was torn. The walls of the hotel seemed to grow heavier. The guests eyed one another with suspicion. Every casual remark took on weight. Collier's newspaper cutting, Finch's notes, Hale's lantern sighting, Mabel's shard of glass, Elliot's chain and key, all fragments, all pieces of something larger. Elena Marlowe had vanished. But this was neither a common flight nor a simple mischance. Each guest had brought with them a secret, and each was now entangled in the mystery. For at the heart of it all lay a single fact. At precisely 0022, a telephone call had been made, and until it was known who had lifted the receiver, the truth of that night would remain locked. Sergeant Rowley had turned Hotel Miramar's small dining room into a temporary interrogation chamber. He placed his notebook, a fountain pen, and a file brought from the town's dusty archives on the table. Guests were summoned one by one, probed with short questions. These interrogations were less about direct answers than about spotting the cracks hidden between the lines. for every statement made after the disappearance seemed to contradict another. The first to be called was Mr. Collier. The man sat down without disturbing his elegant suit and adjusted his glasses. Rowley said, "You mentioned hearing a voice in the lobby at night." Collier shrugged. "Yes, a man whispering on the telephone, but I couldn't make out the words." Rowley took notes. Then he asked about the paper in Collier's hand. It bore the letters A.M.R. Collier looked calm. That was merely a business note. A client in London, Albert M. Rowe. Coincidence. Coincidence? Rowley was not convinced. The same letters had been written on the envelope Elena dropped. Yet Collier, out of habit, drew a cigar from his pocket, trying to reassert his authority. To most, that act seemed like a sign of too much ease. Next came Miss Finch. The schoolteacher had brought her notebook with her. "I only wrote down what I observed," she said. Rowley asked to see it. The pages held notes on the town, small observations about the guests' habits. But one line stood out. "Someone waits on the shore, another dares not leave the hotel. The meeting will not happen." Rowley raised his brows. "On what did you base this?" Finch smiled faintly. "I read people, Sergeant, not by their words, but by their glances." Yet she never revealed who the sentence referred to. When Dr. Hale appeared, he set his pipe on the table. "I am merely an observer," he said. Rowley asked about the lantern he had seen from the window. Hale recounted without hesitation. At 00:30, it moved from the path toward the back of the hotel, a deliberate signal. "A signal to whom?" Rowley pressed. Hale narrowed his eyes. "Perhaps to someone inside the hotel, perhaps to someone outside, but one thing is certain, it was no coincidence." When the Wilcox couple were summoned, the elderly husband and wife looked at each other before answering. The woman said, "I saw a woman's silhouette at midnight." Her husband added, "No, it was later, around 3. The contradiction was obvious. Rowley listened patiently, then wrote in his notes, "They share a life, but not the same memory." The night watchman Elliot was uneasy during questioning. He still carried the chain link in his pocket. Rowley noticed it. "Why didn't you secure the door?" he asked. Elliot replied, "I postponed it. I thought I'd fix it tomorrow." Yet the sweat beading on his face whispered that he might have removed the chain deliberately. Mabel's statement was the most striking. She had already produced the glass shard and given it to Rowley. But now she added, "While cleaning the 3rd floor in the morning, I smelled something faint in room 12. Not perfume. Seaweed." This detail made Rowley pause. The room was on the 3rd floor. Sea air could not reach it so sharply. That meant something, or someone, had carried the scent inside. As the day wore on, rumors spread through the town. Some said Elena was fleeing a lawsuit. Others claimed she had come to meet a married man. "The hotel is always a refuge for those who hide," said one fisherman. That remark lodged itself in Rowley's mind. In the afternoon, Rowley examined the town records. There were inconsistencies in the identity of the woman who had arrived under the name Elena Marlowe. The date of birth did not match that on her old passport. This suggested she might have been traveling under a false identity. If so, her disappearance was not just a personal drama. It was part of a larger game. By evening, new tension broke out in the hotel lobby. Mr. Collier peered into Miss Finch's notebook and read aloud. "Someone else is watching the watcher. Who watches the watcher?" The guests froze. Finch quickly shut the notebook. "It's only a sentence," she said. But that line planted a seed of suspicion in every mind. That night, when the clock struck 1:30 once more, the tension inside the hotel rose. Thomas discovered another strange note in the reception log. 01:15. Attempt at outside line failed. Everyone claimed they had made no call at that hour. Yet the cord had been re-knotted. This time Dr. Hale spoke more openly. "Someone is leading us step by step," he said. "Every detail seems left behind to mislead. The missing spoon, the glass shard, the thread, all may be distractions." Rowley asked, "Then which clue is real?" Hale's reply was short. "The telephone. Everything begins with the telephone and everything will end with it." By midnight everyone had withdrawn to their rooms. But Miss Finch wrote one last line in her notebook. It is not the missing person, but the story of the disappearance itself that has taken the town hostage. Near dawn, a shoe was found by the sea, a slender, new high heel. It could have been Elena's, but strangely, it was alone. The other pair was missing, and its sole was hardly worn, as if it had only been used once. This discovery only made the case more tangled. If the woman had gone to the shore, why leave just one shoe? Or had the shoe been placed there deliberately? Inside the hotel, trust had evaporated. The Wilcoxes no longer shared a table with the other guests. Collier buried himself in his newspaper. Finch hid her notebook. Dr. Hale kept his eyes on the window through the night, waiting to see the lantern's light once again. At the end of the day, Sergeant Rowley gathered his notes. There were multiple suspects, but only one certainty. Elena Marlowe's disappearance was no simple matter. It was a planned, carefully staged vanishing. Each clue was deliberately meant to obscure another. And within the hotel, every guest harbored their own secret. Until those secrets were unearthed, Elena's fate would remain hidden. The small-town police station was unusually busy in the early hours of the morning. Sergeant Rowley had finally accepted that the disappearance at Hotel Miramar was no mere holiday escapade. Yet the clues contradicted one another. Each new finding seemed to undermine the last. The first serious lead came with the discovery of Elena's shoe. It was one half of a pair of slender high heels, almost new. Fishermen had found it on the shore at dawn. The town's rumor mill immediately churned. The woman threw herself into the sea. But when Rowley examined the sole, he noticed something strange. There was no trace of mud, salt, or seaweed. It was as if the shoe had never touched the water. Stranger still, carved faintly into the insole were 3 letters, AMR. Once again, suspicion fell on Mr. Collier. After all, he had been found with a slip of paper bearing those same letters. Rowley confronted him. "How do you explain this mark?" Collier removed his glasses and studied the shoe for a long moment. "I don't know," he said at last. "But this obsession is becoming absurd. It has nothing to do with my business." Yet for the first time there was a slight tremor in his voice. The second lead came from Miss Finch's notebook. In it there was mention of a meeting. The town's gossip-hungry folk were quick to seize upon it. Elena had been meeting a secret lover, they said. Perhaps she had fled, perhaps she had been abducted. But Finch denied it. "I only observe," she insisted. Even so, Rowley's eye caught a small slip of paper tucked between the pages, a telephone number. It belonged to an old line outside of town. When checked against the directory, the number was found to be tied to the old lighthouse. But the lighthouse had been abandoned for a decade. And yet, Dr. Hale's account of a lantern flickering outside the window still demanded an explanation. Could the lighthouse still be in use secretly? Police inspected the path to the lighthouse. The door was rusted, but it seemed to have been forced open in recent days. Inside, dusty staircases, broken lamps, and a table. On the table, the faint ring of a glass. But no belongings of Elena's, no direct evidence. Only one more familiar sign, a sheet of paper with AMR written in the corner. At this point, suspicion leaned heavily on Collier, but Dr. Hale objected. "No," he said firmly, "it's too easy. When every clue points to the same man, that man is innocent." His words stirred mutters of unease among the guests. Collier, for his part, chose to remain silent. The third misdirection came from the shard of glass found by Mabel. Police combed the hotel inventory and determined that it had come from a pocket watch. The watch belonged to the night watchman, Elliot. His master keyring held an old timepiece, and indeed, its glass was missing. Elliot flushed red. "It's been broken for weeks," he said. But Mabel insisted, "No, it was intact last night." Suspicion now turned to Elliot. Yet when Rowley reviewed the watchman's duty log, he found 2 separate witnesses had seen Elliot at his post throughout the night. A fisherman returning from the harbor had greeted him, and the town baker passing by at dawn had noted the hotel lights still burning. Elliot could not have slipped in and out of rooms. That lead, too, dissolved. As the day wore on, the town seethed with speculation. In the cafes, the market, the fishermen's shacks, everyone whispered of Elena Marlowe's true identity. Some claimed she had not disappeared at all, but boarded a train in secret. Others insisted she was tied to a treasure buried outside of town. Rowley appeared to ignore the gossip, but questions crowded his mind. The half-written letter found in her suitcase remained unsolved. It began with "Dearest," but stopped abruptly. When Rowley held the paper to the light, he saw faint marks in the fibers, water stains. Not ink, but drops of salt water, as though someone from the sea had been present when it was written. By late afternoon, a new discovery emerged. The missing book from the hotel's library was found. Chronicles of Disappearances at Sea. It had been left in the damp grass of the hotel garden. Inside, one page had been neatly cut out. That missing page described the mysterious vanishing of a woman in 1897. In that case, too, a single shoe had been found on the shore. This suggested Elena's disappearance had been staged, deliberately modeled after that old case. Someone had copied the script. But who? Rowley now felt himself trapped. Every new clue pointed to a different suspect, yet every piece of evidence seemed to cancel the others. The shoe incriminated Collier, the glass shard accused Elliot, the notebook hinted at Finch, and the book implicated them all in the same elaborate game. As night fell, Dr. Hale spoke quietly with the other guests. "I believe we are all being misled," he said. "The real clue has been in front of us from the beginning." But he would not explain further. He only lit his pipe and gazed into the dark window. At midnight, the telephone rang once more. Thomas rushed to the reception desk and lifted the receiver. But all he heard was the murmur of the sea. Then, within the static, a single word emerged: Rosemont. Thomas's blood ran cold. For only 2 days earlier, the last woman to check into the hotel had given her name as Amelia Rosemont. And the irony was this: while everyone obsessed over Elena's disappearance, not one person had thought to check if Amelia was still in her room that night. When the single word Rosemont echoed through the cold stone walls of the hotel at midnight, everyone froze. Until that moment, every eye had been fixed on the vanished Elena Marlowe. Amelia Rosemont had remained in the background, a quiet guest. She rarely appeared in the library, spoke little at meals, but listened closely. Now that single word had turned the entire story upside down. The next morning, when Sergeant Rowley entered Amelia's room, he at first thought she was sleeping. But as he drew closer, he noticed the bed was carefully arranged, the pillows neatly puffed. The room was spotless, too spotless. Her suitcase was gone. At that moment it became clear. Of the 2 women at the hotel, neither had truly vanished. Both were gone. Suspicions whirled like a storm. Had Elena disappeared, or had Rosemont taken her place? Or had they been the same person all along? Dr. Hale, lighting his pipe with composure, spoke coldly. "It was in front of us from the very beginning. 2 women, yes, but only one game." The clues were laid out one by one. The missing spoon. Seemingly trivial, but its bent tip had been used to unlock the hidden latch to the kitchen entrance. The thread, torn from Elena's shawl but deliberately left on the windowsill to suggest she had jumped. The glass shard, blamed on Elliot's watch, but in truth it had come from the library's old mirror, the mirror used for the identity switch. The phone calls, not recordings, nor an outsider. Amelia herself had been whispering, disguising her own voice. The logbook times were deliberate misdirection. The shoe, not Elena's at all, but Amelia's. The letters AMR carved inside were a smokescreen, meant to stir confusion about her true identity. Slowly, the picture in Rowley's mind came together. Elena Marlowe and Amelia Rosemont were not the same woman, but 2 halves of the same plan. They knew each other. One would vanish, the other would step into her identity. But why? The answer lay in the half-written letter found in the suitcase. The unfinished line revealed more than it seemed. "Dearest, I must write these words, because if anything happens to me, you must know the game was left unfinished." The word unfinished pointed unmistakably to a plan meant for 2. Dr. Hale spoke again. "One of the women made it out of town. The other left false traces to trap us here. The question is, which one is still alive?" At that moment Miss Finch rose, waving her notebook. "I noticed," she said. The night Elena supposedly disappeared, her window was wide open. By morning, its angle had changed. Someone had come back into the room. A chill fell over the hotel. That meant the vanished woman had never truly left. She was still inside. Raleigh and 2 constables searched the rooms one by one. In the attic, they found an old trunk. Inside lay a black overcoat, stuffed away. In its pocket, a train ticket. Leventon, London. The date, 1 day after the disappearance. The escape had been postponed. On the coat's label, in small letters, was written, Amelia Rosemont. Now the picture sharpened. Rosemont had been ready to shed her identity and take on Elena's. But something had gone wrong. One woman had vanished. The other tried to assume her role without leaving a trace. Then came the great twist. Comparing the hotel records, Raleigh noticed the signatures. The woman who had signed in as Elena Marlowe and the one as Amelia Rosemont had almost identical handwriting. Except for one slight flourish, they were written by the same hand. From the very start, there had been no 2 women. There had only ever been one. One woman, 2 names. One day Elena, the next day Amelia. Guests, seeing different clothes and hairstyles, had believed there were 2, but it was always the same woman, deceiving them all. Dr. Hale smiled faintly. As Agatha Christie once said, people hide best right before our very eyes. But why? The answer came with a small envelope hidden in the lining of her suitcase. Inside lay a London bank slip. A large sum of money had been deposited. In the description, a single word: disappearance. She had been paid to stage her own vanishing. Perhaps to derail a lawsuit, perhaps to cover a scandal. But the perfection of her scheme collapsed over one flaw. Her 2 signatures were identical. The final scene was dramatic. Sergeant Raleigh gathered all the guests in the hotel's parlor. He laid each clue on the table: the missing spoon, the thread, the glass shard, the shoe, the notebook entries. Then he declared in a firm voice, Elena Marlowe, or Amelia Rosemont, whatever her name truly is, was only one woman. She played us all, but the game is over. The door creaked open. From behind the curtain stepped the woman who had hidden for days. Her dress was wrinkled, her eyes weary. The guests rose to their feet. She spoke a single quiet sentence. They paid me to disappear, but I truly disappeared. Raleigh pronounced the verdict. Elena Marlowe, also known as Amelia Rosemont, you staged your vanishing for money, but your plan was flawed. 2 signatures betrayed you, and with them, the entire secret unraveled. The woman lowered her head. Yes, she admitted. It's true. A law firm in London paid me £10,000. To collapse a lawsuit, I had to vanish. I crafted 2 identities, destroyed myself in plain sight. But before I could leave the hotel, the plan fell apart. The parlor exhaled as one. No mystery remained. She confessed to her false disappearance. Even her true name was revealed: Amelia Rosemont. Elena Marlowe had been nothing but part of the act. Sergeant Raleigh delivered the final line. Now we see. This was no murder, but a deception. And deception is still a crime. Amelia Rosemont, before our very eyes, you destroyed both Elena and yourself. And now, you will answer for it. She was taken into custody. And so, the mystery was finally solved.